The people who love you the most are often the ones who quietly notice what everyone else misses. Noah Bennett stood in front of the open refrigerator for nearly a minute, staring at shelves that should have been empty. Fresh fruit rested beside cartons of milk, neatly packaged sandwiches filled one drawer, and enough groceries sat inside to last another week. He closed the refrigerator, rubbed his eyes, and opened it again as though the food might disappear the second time. It did not. That made even less sense. 3 days earlier, Noah had checked the balance in his bank account and realized he had barely enough money to cover the bus ride to his next job interview. His freelance design projects had almost completely dried up. The company that had promised him a full-time position had suddenly frozen hiring, and every carefully planned budget had slowly fallen apart. He had quietly begun skipping meals whenever Liam Parker was working late, hoping his roommate would never notice. Yet somehow the kitchen never stayed empty. Whenever the last loaf of bread disappeared, another appeared the next morning. When the coffee container reached the bottom, a fresh bag was waiting beside the machine before Noah woke up. Even the eggs seemed to replace themselves without explanation. At first, Noah convinced himself that he had simply forgotten whose turn it was to buy groceries. Then he checked the shared expense spreadsheet they had created after moving in together. Nothing had been added for nearly 3 weeks. Liam never mentioned buying food. Noah certainly had not. The numbers refused to explain the full refrigerator standing in front of him. That evening, Liam returned from work carrying only his laptop bag and a relaxed smile. He greeted Noah exactly as he always did before hanging his jacket near the apartment door. "How did the interview go?" he asked while filling a kettle with water. Noah shrugged. "They said they will let me know." Liam nodded with quiet understanding. "I hope they call soon." There was no awkward sympathy, no uncomfortable advice, only the same calm kindness that had become part of everyday life inside the apartment. They ate dinner together while discussing movies, Seattle weather, and a bookstore that had recently opened nearby. Liam never once mentioned groceries. Neither did Noah. Later that night, Noah walked into the kitchen for a glass of water after hearing the soft vibration of a phone resting on the counter. Liam had stepped onto the apartment balcony to answer a call, leaving the screen illuminated for only a moment. Noah had no intention of looking, but a digital payment notification appeared before the display dimmed again. One line caught his attention without him trying to read further. "Grocery market. Payment approved." Less than 2 hours earlier. Before Noah could step away, Liam returned inside, carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. Without saying anything, Liam casually unlocked his phone, tapped the screen once, and the notification disappeared forever. Then he smiled exactly as he always did and handed 1 mug to Noah. "You look tired," he said gently. "Try to get some rest tonight." Noah accepted the tea with a quiet thank you, but his eyes drifted toward the refrigerator once again. For the first time since moving into the apartment, he realized that someone had been quietly carrying burdens he had never asked them to carry, and the person pretending not to notice his struggles might have noticed every single one. Noah could not stop thinking about the grocery receipt that had flashed across Liam's phone. It was only a brief notification, visible for barely a second before disappearing forever, yet it quietly answered a question that had been growing inside him for weeks. The refrigerator had never been filling itself. Someone had simply been making sure Noah never had to see it empty. He lay awake that night listening to the familiar sounds of the apartment settling into silence, wondering how many other small acts of kindness he had failed to notice. His thoughts drifted back to the afternoon he first arrived in Seattle nearly 4 months earlier, carrying 2 aging suitcases, a backpack, and more uncertainty than confidence. Losing his previous job had forced him to leave behind the city where he had imagined building his future. Every apartment he viewed felt either too expensive or too temporary until he found a modest online listing advertising a single furnished bedroom with a surprisingly reasonable monthly rent. The photographs showed a clean apartment filled with sunlight and books, but they revealed nothing about the man who already lived there. Noah still remembered knocking on the door with quiet nervousness. Liam opened it wearing a simple navy sweater and greeted him with an easy smile that somehow erased the awkwardness almost immediately. Instead of beginning with questions about income, references, or personal history, Liam asked whether Noah wanted coffee after such a long drive. They spent nearly an hour talking around the kitchen table while afternoon sunlight filled the apartment with warmth. Liam listened far more than he spoke, never interrupting, never pushing Noah to explain why he had suddenly relocated across the country. When Noah apologized for being between jobs, Liam simply shrugged. "Everybody starts over at some point," he said. "You do not have to justify trying again." Those words stayed with Noah long after he unpacked his belongings. Living together became unexpectedly comfortable. Every evening, the small lamp beside the apartment entrance remained on whenever Noah worked late or returned from interviews after dark. Liam never mentioned turning it on, and Noah never asked. Some mornings Noah woke to discover fresh coffee already brewing, even though Liam had left for work nearly an hour earlier. On difficult days when rejection emails arrived one after another, Noah often found homemade soup waiting in the refrigerator with a handwritten note reminding him to eat before sending out more applications. Liam always acted as though these thoughtful gestures required no recognition. If Noah thanked him, Liam usually smiled and changed the subject before the conversation became uncomfortable. Slowly, almost without realizing it, Noah began measuring the passing weeks through those quiet routines instead of the disappointing interviews. The apartment stopped feeling like a temporary place to sleep and gradually became the first place that truly felt safe since his life had unexpectedly changed. That was exactly why the grocery receipt unsettled him so deeply. Kindness that happened once could be called generosity. Kindness repeated every single day without asking for anything in return felt almost impossible to understand. As Noah prepared for another interview the following morning, he noticed a neatly packed lunch resting beside his laptop with a simple handwritten note that read, "Good luck today." There was no signature because there did not need to be one. For the first time, Noah began wondering not only how much Liam had quietly noticed about his struggles, but also how long Liam had been choosing to help without expecting Noah to ever discover the truth. The following week passed quietly, yet Noah found himself noticing details that had once blended into the background of everyday life. It was as though someone had adjusted the focus on a camera, allowing him to see small moments that had always been there. Every morning the coffee machine was already programmed before he woke up, always finishing its cycle 5 minutes before his alarm sounded. When the weather forecast predicted rain, an extra umbrella somehow appeared beside the apartment door. When the temperature dropped unexpectedly one evening, the heat had already been turned on before Noah returned from another unsuccessful interview. None of those things came with explanations. They simply happened. One afternoon, while searching the bathroom cabinet for pain reliever after a long day of walking across downtown Seattle, Noah noticed a brand new box of cold medicine sitting neatly beside the first aid kit. He paused for a moment. 2 weeks earlier, he had mentioned having a sore throat only once, casually, while making dinner. He had never bought medicine because he was trying to save every possible dollar. Somehow the medicine had appeared anyway. That evening, Liam came home carrying nothing more than his laptop and a reusable coffee mug. Noah considered asking about it several times during dinner, but could never find the right words. Instead, they talked about a documentary Liam had watched and a small bakery that had recently opened nearby. The conversation flowed naturally, just as it always did. Later that night, Noah settled onto the couch with his laptop to continue updating his resume. After nearly an hour of editing, the computer suddenly restarted without warning. He sighed in frustration, convinced he had lost everything he had worked on. Before he could panic, the screen came back to life noticeably faster than before. Programs that had been running slowly for weeks now opened almost instantly. Storage space that had nearly reached its limit had somehow been cleaned and reorganized. Liam glanced over from the dining table, where he had been reading a technical manual. "Everything all right?" he asked casually. Noah looked at the screen in confusion. "I think my computer just fixed itself." Liam smiled faintly without looking up from his book. "Sometimes it just needs a little maintenance." Noah stared at him for a second before laughing softly. Computers usually do not perform maintenance by themselves. Liam simply turned another page. Maybe this one wanted to help. The answer sounded playful, yet something inside Noah quietly connected it to everything else that had happened over the past month. Nothing around him seemed to improve by accident. The apartment thermostat always worked perfectly. Burned-out light bulbs were replaced before he noticed they had failed. Even the television remote somehow always had fresh batteries. Small inconveniences disappeared before they ever became real problems. As he prepared for bed, Noah walked through the apartment with new eyes. The entrance lamp still glowed softly, The refrigerator remained fully stocked, and tomorrow's coffee beans had already been measured into the machine. None of it felt extravagant. None of it demanded recognition. Every thoughtful detail existed only to make someone else's day a little easier. Standing alone in the quiet kitchen, Noah suddenly realized that the greatest kindnesses often left no signature behind. Yet the more invisible those gestures became, the more impossible it was to believe they happened by chance. And for the first time, he wondered whether Liam had been quietly taking care of him from the very beginning, long before Noah had ever learned to notice. Several days later, Noah left the apartment earlier than usual for what he hoped would be his final interview, before finding steady work again. The morning air carried the cool scent of rain, and downtown Seattle was already filling with commuters hurrying toward office buildings. He spent nearly an hour answering questions, presenting his portfolio, and trying to sound more confident than he actually felt. When the interview ended, the hiring manager thanked him politely and promised to reach out soon. Noah had heard those same words often enough to know they guaranteed nothing. He walked home slowly, mentally calculating how much longer his remaining savings would last. By the time he reached the apartment building, he had already decided he needed to search for a cheaper place to live. That evening, he stopped by the leasing office to ask whether any smaller units were available nearby. Before he reached the front desk, he overheard the property manager speaking with another employee behind a partially open office door. "Liam is one of the few tenants who never complains," the manager said with appreciation. He even insisted on covering the rent increase himself so his roommate would not have to worry while looking for work. Noah froze where he stood. "Does his roommate know?" the employee asked quietly. The manager smiled. "I do not think so. Liam specifically asked us not to mention it." Noah stepped away before either of them noticed he had been standing there. His heart felt impossibly heavy as every unexplained kindness suddenly found another answer. The groceries, the coffee, the packed lunches, the repaired computer. Now even the rent had quietly been protected without a single conversation. He walked through the neighborhood for nearly an hour before returning home. Liam was already in the kitchen preparing dinner as though it were another completely ordinary evening. The comforting smell of tomato soup filled the apartment while fresh bread cooled on a wooden cutting board. "How did the interview go?" Liam asked with his usual gentle smile. Noah managed a small shrug. "It went all right." Liam nodded. "I hope it works out." Nothing in his expression suggested he expected gratitude for anything else. He simply stirred the soup and set another bowl on the table. Noah wanted to ask why. He wanted to demand an explanation for every silent sacrifice. Instead, he looked around the apartment that had slowly become the safest place he knew and realized he could no longer tell where kindness ended and pity might begin. That thought frightened him more than financial uncertainty ever had. Late that night, after Liam had gone to bed, Noah opened the closet in his bedroom and pulled out the old suitcase he had used when he first arrived in Seattle. He placed it quietly beside the door without unfolding it. The empty suitcase seemed to ask a question he was not ready to answer. If Liam had done all of this out of compassion alone, Noah feared staying would only increase a debt he could never repay. If there was another reason hidden beneath every quiet gesture, Noah was even more afraid of hoping for something that might never be true. As the apartment settled into silence, the entrance lamp still glowed softly in the hallway, waiting for someone who was already home, while Noah stared at the suitcase and wondered whether leaving would hurt less than accepting kindness he no longer believed he deserved. The suitcase remained beside Noah's bedroom door for 2 full days. He never packed another shirt inside it, yet he never pushed it back into the closet either. It became a quiet reminder that he was standing between 2 choices, neither of which felt right. Every morning Liam greeted him with the same easy smile, poured coffee into his favorite mug, and wished him luck before leaving for work. Nothing about Liam's behavior changed, which somehow made everything more difficult. Noah now understood that every thoughtful gesture had been real, but he still could not understand why someone would quietly give so much without expecting anything in return. Friday evening arrived with steady rain tapping against the apartment windows. Noah came home carrying another polite rejection email in his inbox and a heavier heart than usual. He found Liam in the kitchen preparing homemade pasta while soft jazz played from a small speaker on the counter. The apartment smelled of garlic, fresh herbs, and warm bread. For a brief moment, everything felt exactly as it had during the happiest weeks they had shared together. Then Liam noticed the suitcase still standing beside Noah's bedroom door. His smile faded almost imperceptibly, though his voice remained calm. "Are you going somewhere this weekend?" he asked. Noah looked toward the suitcase before answering quietly. "I found another place." The words felt strange even as he said them because he had not signed a lease or scheduled a moving truck. He had only convinced himself that leaving might be the kindest decision for both of them. Liam stood silently for several seconds before placing the wooden spoon on the counter. He did not argue. He did not ask Noah to stay. Instead, he walked to the dining table and slowly pulled out a chair. "Will you sit with me for a minute?" he asked gently. Noah nodded and sat across from him. Rain continued falling outside while the apartment seemed unusually still. Liam folded his hands together before speaking again. "Did I make this place feel less like home?" The question caught Noah completely off guard. He had expected explanations or excuses, not quiet self-doubt. Noah lowered his eyes, unable to answer immediately. "No," he admitted at last. "That is the problem." Liam waited patiently. "This has been the safest place I have lived in a very long time." He hesitated before continuing. "That is why I cannot keep accepting things I cannot repay." Liam's expression softened with quiet understanding. "I never kept score." Noah smiled sadly. "I did." Silence settled between them once more, but it no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt honest. Liam looked toward the entrance lamp glowing softly in the hallway before speaking again. Sometimes helping someone is not about fixing their problems. Sometimes it is simply about making sure they do not carry them alone. Noah felt his chest tighten. He wanted to ask why Liam had chosen him, why every thoughtful gesture had been directed towards someone who believed he had nothing left to offer. Yet the questions remained trapped behind his lips. Liam stood and quietly returned to stirring dinner before it could burn. Noah watched him from across the room, realizing that the man who had quietly changed his life was still treating the evening like any other ordinary night. As Noah finally rose from the table, he noticed the suitcase reflected faintly in the hallway mirror beside the entrance lamp. For the first time, he wondered whether he had packed it because he truly wanted to leave, or because staying meant risking feelings he was no longer certain he could hide. The conversation with Liam lingered in Noah's mind long after the apartment had gone quiet. He barely slept that night, replaying every small act of kindness he had misunderstood as charity instead of genuine care. By the following afternoon, he found himself wandering through a neighborhood bookstore, hoping that walking without a destination might clear his thoughts. As he reached for a design magazine, he heard someone behind him call Liam's name. Noah turned and saw an older man greeting Liam with the easy familiarity of an old friend. Liam smiled warmly, introduced them briefly, then excused himself to answer a work call outside, leaving Noah alone with the stranger for only a few minutes. The man looked at Noah with quiet curiosity before speaking. "You must be the roommate Liam keeps talking about." Noah smiled politely, unsure how to respond. The man continued without realizing how important his next words would become. "I have not seen Liam worry about someone this much since his younger brother." Noah looked up immediately. "His brother?" The man nodded slowly, his expression growing more thoughtful. "Years ago, Liam had a younger brother named Ethan. He struggled for a long time, but rarely asked anyone for help. Liam always believed everything would eventually be all right because Ethan kept saying he was fine. By the time Liam understood how much he had been hiding, he felt it was already too late. He has spent years wishing he had noticed the small signs sooner." Noah remained completely still. The older man sighed softly before continuing. "That experience changed him. Ever since then, Liam pays attention to little things most people overlook. If someone skips meals, stops replacing groceries, seems unusually quiet, or carries more than they should alone, he notices. He never wants another person to believe they have to struggle in silence." Noah lowered his eyes, suddenly remembering every unopened refrigerator, every packed lunch, every cup of coffee waiting before sunrise, every repaired inconvenience, and every quiet gesture that had arrived before he ever asked for help. None of it had been pity. It had been someone recognizing familiar pain before it became impossible to carry. Liam returned a few moments later, unaware of the conversation that had taken place. He smiled naturally and asked whether Noah had found the magazine he wanted. Noah simply nodded, unable to trust his own voice. They walked home together beneath gray Seattle skies, talking about ordinary things while Noah quietly viewed every memory through a completely different lens. That evening, after Liam went to bed, Noah remained awake in the living room watching the entrance lamp cast a soft glow across the hallway. He finally understood why Liam never asked questions when Noah pretended everything was fine. He had learned that people carrying the heaviest burdens often became experts at hiding them. Liam had never tried to rescue Noah. He had simply refused to let him face difficult days alone. Sitting in the silence, Noah realized that the greatest kindness is not waiting until someone asks for help. Sometimes it is quietly noticing that they cannot bring themselves to ask at all. And for the first time since arriving in Seattle, Noah understood that every unnoticed gesture had been an expression of hope rather than obligation, making the suitcase beside his bedroom door feel heavier than it ever had before. The suitcase remained exactly where Noah had left it, but he no longer looked at it the same way. It was no longer an escape. It had become a reminder of how quickly fear could convince someone to walk away from the very place they had always wanted to find. A few evenings later, while Liam worked late at the office, Noah decided to clean the apartment as a way to quiet his restless thoughts. He carefully dusted the bookshelves, watered the plants by the living room window, and organized the kitchen cabinets that Liam always kept so neatly arranged. When he opened the drawer beneath the coffee maker to replace a package of filters, he noticed a plain white envelope resting beneath an instruction manual. It had no stamp, no address, and no seal. Only 2 handwritten words appeared across the front in careful blue ink. Noah Bennett. He immediately recognized Liam's handwriting. For several long moments, he simply stared at it. His first instinct was to place it back exactly where he had found it. Whatever Liam had written had never been meant to be discovered this way. Yet something inside him quietly whispered that the letter belonged to a conversation both of them had been avoiding for weeks. With hesitant hands, Noah unfolded the pages. The first sentence immediately tightened his chest. I am writing this because there is a chance I will never find the courage to say these words out loud. Noah continued reading slowly. Liam explained that he had noticed Noah pretending to be all right almost from the first week they lived together. He had seen the empty refrigerator, the skipped dinners, the growing stack of unanswered job applications, and the tired smile that became a little harder to believe every morning. Liam admitted that every quiet act of kindness had been intentional, not because Noah was weak, but because no one should have to face difficult seasons believing they were completely alone. Near the middle of the letter, the handwriting became noticeably less steady. People assume I am straight because it is easier than explaining feelings I have never been brave enough to admit. I never corrected anyone because I was afraid that if you knew the truth, every cup of coffee, every grocery bag, every light I left on would suddenly feel like pressure instead of kindness. Noah paused, reading those lines again before continuing. The last thing I ever wanted was for you to feel that you owed me anything. If all we ever become is 2 roommates who quietly look after each other, I will still be grateful that you walked through my front door that afternoon. Noah lowered the letter into his lap as emotion quietly settled over him. Every fear he had carried suddenly seemed painfully misplaced. Liam had hidden nothing out of manipulation. He had hidden his feelings because he believed protecting Noah's comfort mattered more than pursuing his own hopes. Noah carefully folded the letter and returned it to the envelope exactly as he had found it. Moments later, he heard the apartment door unlock. Liam stepped inside carrying groceries, smiling with the same familiar warmth he had shown every day since they met. Neither man mentioned the letter. They simply prepared dinner together while soft evening sunlight filled the apartment. Yet for the first time, Noah understood that the greatest secret Liam had been carrying was never his kindness. It was the quiet hope that caring for someone would never become the reason they chose to leave. The following morning arrived quietly, wrapped in soft rain and the familiar smell of fresh coffee drifting through the apartment. Noah woke earlier than usual, but instead of immediately searching job listings or checking his email, he simply sat at the kitchen table watching the entrance lamp slowly fade beneath the growing daylight. The letter Liam had written rested safely inside Noah's jacket pocket. He had carried it with him since the night before, not because he intended to keep it forever, but because reading it had changed something inside him that could no longer be ignored. Liam emerged from his bedroom dressed for work, surprised to find breakfast already waiting. 2 plates sat neatly on the table beside 2 steaming mugs of coffee prepared exactly the way each of them liked it. Liam smiled with quiet appreciation. "You did not have to do this," he said gently. Noah looked up and returned a small smile. "I wanted to." They began eating in comfortable silence, but this time the silence felt different. It no longer carried uncertainty. It carried two people gathering the courage to say what had remained hidden for far too long. After several minutes, Noah reached into his jacket and carefully placed the folded envelope on the table between them. Liam immediately recognized it. His expression shifted from surprise to quiet embarrassment before he lowered his eyes. "You found it," he said softly. Noah nodded. "I was cleaning." Liam gave a faint, understanding smile. "I kept telling myself I would throw it away. I never could." Noah rested his hand gently on the envelope. "I read it." Liam remained silent for several seconds before taking a slow breath. "Then I owe you an apology. Those words were never supposed to become a burden." Noah shook his head immediately. "They did not become a burden." He paused, searching for the right words. "They became an answer." Liam looked at him with quiet confusion. Noah continued, speaking more honestly than he ever had before. "For weeks I kept asking myself why someone would notice every little struggle without expecting anything back. I thought kindness always needed a reason. Then I realized the reason was simply who you are." Liam smiled sadly. "I never wanted you to think I was trying to change your feelings." Noah met his eyes with calm certainty. "You did not." The apartment grew silent once more as rain tapped gently against the windows. Finally, Noah spoke again. "The only thing that frightened me was believing I might lose the one person who made this place feel like home." Liam's shoulders relaxed as though he had been carrying invisible weight for months. He looked toward the hallway where the old suitcase still stood beside Noah's bedroom door. "Are you still leaving?" he asked quietly. Noah followed his gaze before standing from the table. Without saying another word, he walked into the hallway, picked up the suitcase, carried it back into his bedroom, and slid it beneath the bed. When he returned, Liam was still watching him with quiet disbelief. Noah smiled warmly. "I think I packed that suitcase because I was afraid of hoping for something impossible." Liam's voice was almost a whisper. "And now?" Noah looked directly at him. "Now I think hope deserves at least one honest chance." Neither of them rushed toward dramatic declarations or impossible promises. Instead, they finished breakfast together while sunlight slowly broke through the clouds outside, and for the first time since they had become roommates, nothing important remained hidden between them except the future they would now have the opportunity to discover together. Several months passed so quietly that neither Noah nor Liam could remember the exact day everything changed. Perhaps there had never been a single moment at all. Perhaps trust had simply grown the same way morning light slowly filled their apartment, almost unnoticed until the darkness was gone. Noah finally received the phone call he had been hoping for and accepted a full-time design position with a small creative studio in downtown Seattle. On his first morning of work, he stepped into the kitchen expecting to prepare breakfast himself, only to find two familiar mugs already waiting beside the coffee machine. Liam looked up from the newspaper with the same calm smile Noah had come to know so well. "Big day," he said warmly. Noah laughed. "I was going to surprise you with coffee." Liam raised one mug slightly. "You can surprise me tomorrow." They shared breakfast together before leaving the apartment side by side, walking towards separate office buildings beneath a clear blue sky that seemed brighter than either of them remembered. Life slowly settled into a comfortable rhythm built from ordinary moments rather than dramatic promises. They still visited the neighborhood bookstore on quiet weekends, still cooked dinner together after long workdays, and still argued playfully about whose turn it was to choose the movie every Friday night. The difference was that neither of them hid behind silence anymore. When Noah felt overwhelmed, he admitted it instead of pretending everything was fine. When Liam worried about carrying too much responsibility alone, he allowed someone else to stand beside him instead of quietly handling everything himself. One rainy evening, nearly a year after Noah had first walked through the apartment door with two worn suitcases, he arrived home later than expected after finishing an important project. As he climbed the final flight of stairs, he noticed something familiar glowing beneath the apartment door. The entrance lamp was still on, just as it had been every evening since the beginning. Noah smiled before unlocking the door. Liam was sitting on the living room sofa reading a novel with a second bookmark resting between the pages, quietly waiting without saying he was waiting. "You left the light on again," Noah said with gentle amusement as he hung up his jacket. Liam looked up from the book and smiled. Old habits. Noah walked over, switched off the lamp, and returned to stand beside him. The apartment became softly illuminated only by the warm lights inside the living room. You do not have to leave it on anymore, Noah said quietly. Liam tilted his head with curious eyes. Why? Noah reached for his hand with calm certainty, no hesitation remaining where fear had once lived. Because I already know how to find my way home. Liam smiled, and for the first time neither of them needed to wonder what the other truly meant. Outside, Seattle disappeared beneath another gentle evening rain while the apartment remained warm, peaceful, and filled with the quiet routines that had brought two strangers together long before either had found the courage to speak honestly. The refrigerator was full, the coffee beans were ready for morning. The hallway was finally dark because no one was waiting alone anymore, and Noah realized that love had never arrived through grand speeches or extraordinary moments. It had arrived one unnoticed kindness at a time until the smallest gestures became the strongest foundation either of them had ever known. Sometimes the people who change your life do not rescue you with perfect words. Sometimes they simply notice you are struggling, quietly stay beside you, and wait patiently until you are finally ready to believe that you never had to carry everything alone.